Hello and welcome back to Born to Rant. I'm Brandon, and this week we are taking a look at the last Robin Hood movie to be a major hit at the global box office. A movie that gave us one of the most insane performances in Alan Rickman's career, and of course, the movie that gave us the classic Bryan Adams slow jam, Everything I Do It For You. That's right, today we are diving into the world of 1991's Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, directed by Kevin Reynolds and starring Kevin Costner, Alan Rickman, Morgan Freeman, Christian Slater, and Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio. We'll take a look at the movie's Indiana Jones-inspired origins, how it all came together, the nearly disastrous production, everything that makes the movie worth watching today, and its legacy 35 years later. Now, this is a movie I have to confess that I did not grow up with. I know I saw it at least once or twice as a kid, but it had been at least 25 years since I last sat down to watch it. To be honest, growing up, this movie's spiritual sequel, The Three Musketeers, reigned supreme in my household, and my favorite Robin Hood movie growing up was Men in Tights. Actually, I did not realize that Men in Tights was a direct send-up of this movie specifically until rewatching. I mean, I knew there were a bunch of jokes at this movie's expense in it.
Unlike some other Robin Hoods, I can speak with an English accent.
But I didn't realize it's like the exact same story beat for beat. But obviously, Prince of Thieves was a big deal when it came out. It was Costner's big follow-up to Dances with Wolves and all of the Oscars it won, and this would end up going on to become the second highest grossing movie of 1991 behind Terminator 2. And sure, it's got some problems, but there's also a lot of really fun stuff in this movie, like the river fight or Freeman constantly being baffled at how primitive the English are.
How did your uneducated kind ever take Jerusalem?
But I mean, obviously, there is really only one star of this movie, and it's Alan Rickman, just giving the biggest, most insane performance of all time. But let's take a step back before I start diving into Rickman's performance and the rest of the movie and learn a little bit more about how the movie came to be and its dramatic production. And it all begins in August of 1989, and British writer/producer Penn Densham sitting down with the idea of turning Robin Hood from the swashbuckling adventurer of the Errol Flynn movie from the 1930s into something more modern but still a throwback, and he actually thought of Indiana Jones as a direct inspiration, which is ironic because there's a direct quote from director Kevin Reynolds saying, "What I did not want to do was Indiana Jones." But anyway, Densham hammered out a 90-page outline, which he then passed off to his producing and writing partner John Watson, who turned it into a full script, and the two then took it over to Morgan Creek Productions to see if they might be interested in buying and producing the movie. And at this point, Morgan Creek was a smaller studio that was making waves with low-budget movies like Young Guns and Major League, and they immediately saw the potential in a big-budget Robin Hood adaptation made for the same crowd that ate up Young Guns. So the production secured Warner Brothers as a distributor and a budget that was right around $60 million, which means it was then time to figure out how the hell they were going to make this movie and make it before 20th Century Fox had the chance to make their own Robin Hood movie, which was also being fast-tracked at the same time. So now they had their budget and distributor and production timeline, but no stars or director, and this is where Kevin Reynolds enters the picture. And at this point in his career, he directed just 2 movies, neither of which had been a hit, but his first movie, Fandango, just so happened to be Kevin Costner's first ever starring role. And just a quick side note, if you've never seen Fandango, I cannot recommend it enough. It's truly one of the best road trip movies ever made, but I also am completely biased because this was a movie my dad showed me when I was a teenager, and it also happens to be the last movie he and I ever watched together. So anyway, not only had Reynolds directed Costner in his first starring role, Costner had actually brought Reynolds on to Dances with Wolves to help him direct the famous buffalo hunt scene. And at this point, the studio had offered the movie to Costner multiple times, but he kept turning them down. That is until they told him they'd secured his buddy, Kevin Reynolds, as director, and then he happily signed on. Ironically enough, Alan Rickman also turned this movie down multiple times, and he only accepted once Kevin Reynolds told him he could do whatever the hell he wanted with the role. So Rickman hired comedian Ruby Wax and playwright Peter Barnes to quietly and unofficially help him rewrite the sheriff's dialogue. He would also end up ad-libbing quite a bit while shooting as well, like his famous line,
"No more merciful beheadings. And call off Christmas."
was fully ad-libbed. So by the time the production had its director, cast, and crew in place, Reynolds had just 10 weeks for pre-production before filming was set to begin. Because remember, they were competing with Fox's Robin Hood movie, so they had to get theirs done first. And on September 6th, 1990, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves went into production, filming entirely in England to give the movie a little extra authenticity. Now, by all accounts, the production of this movie was an absolute disaster. Costner broke his nose when his horse reared unexpectedly, and he and Reynolds almost immediately started clashing, with one of the biggest issues being, of course, Costner's accent. Now, supposedly Costner had hired a dialect coach and everything, but Reynolds insisted that the audience wouldn't believe him with a British accent. But of course, Costner was still going to try it out a little anyway, seemingly just to annoy Reynolds. And the production was also always dealing with weather delays, because it turns out it gets kind of cold and gray in England as fall turns to winter and the days get shorter. Who knew? Reynolds also really likes to point out that at this point, Costner was completely exhausted, going straight from directing and starring in Dances with Wolves into starring in Robin Hood, and then going straight from Robin Hood to starring in JFK. The dude basically worked for like 3 or 4 years straight with no breaks, and this is right in the middle of that run. Now, once production wrapped and the movie went into post-production, even more drama would come into play. Early versions of the movie saw Rickman's sheriff completely outshining Costner in every moment, so the studio and producers forced Reynolds to recut and enhance Costner's performance, which he obviously agreed to do. And then when the movie went out for test screenings, it scored a 92, which is crazy high. But the problem was the audiences all still were saying that Rickman, not Costner, was their favorite part of the movie. And since the studio was banking on Costner's star power, they really felt this needed to shift. So they locked Reynolds and his editor, Peter Boyle, out of the editing bay and completely recut the movie. And like I said, at this point, Costner had already moved on and was deep in production on JFK. So he wasn't as hands-on with post, but Reynolds has always felt that Costner could have put his foot down and stopped the re-edit from happening. And this caused a huge rift in their friendship that wouldn't be mended until 1994 when Costner hired him to direct Waterworld, but that would only end up leading to more problems and Reynolds actually quitting and walking off the Waterworld set. So thanks to DGA rules, the studio was required to show Reynolds their new cut before it was released to theaters. And just 3 weeks before the movie's premiere, after seeing the studio's cut, Reynolds just decided to walk away and not even attend the premiere. And on June 14th, 1991, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves was released into theaters, and on its opening weekend, it would place first at the box office and bring in $25.6 million against its $60 million budget. And it managed to stick in the top 10 of the US box office for another 15 weeks. Bringing its worldwide total to $390.4 million, making it a massive success for everyone involved. It would also be nominated for 1 Oscar for Best Original Song, and of course the cowards at the Academy didn't even nominate Alan Rickman, but thank God his home country didn't ignore him, because he took home a much-deserved BAFTA for Best Supporting Actor. Apologies for the quick interruption, but I wanted to pop in and remind you that Born to Rant is a completely independent channel, and if you're enjoying the video so far, your support by either liking or subscribing would mean the world. Plus, if it means anything to you, I use absolutely no AI in the making of my videos. And with all of that out of the way, I think it's time for us to dive deep into the world of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and everything that makes it still worth watching today.
Loxley! I'm gonna cut your heart out with a spoon!
Why a spoon, cousin? Why not an axe?
Because it's dull, you twit. It'll hurt more.
Now, the opening sequence of this movie is immediately action-packed and fun, and we've got Costner wearing one of the worst fake beards of all time. But I love his little
"This is English courage"
move, and then breaking out of prison and saving Morgan Freeman's Azim along the way. And one of my favorite bits in the movie is that Azim refuses to fulfill his life debt to Robin until he's ready to do so. And in his defense, he really does save it for when it counts. And I actually think that Freeman and Costner have decent buddy chemistry throughout this movie, and I like how their affection for one another grows. Azim starts out by calling him Christian, and by the end it's Sadiq, which is an Arabic word meaning friend. And I do briefly want to talk about the introduction of Robin's dad, Duncan, and the sheriff. Mostly just to say that I think Rickman has a great first appearance here. He's so creepy and weird, and I love him rephrasing his request to Robin's dad.
Join us or die.
There's also the introduction of Michael Wincott's Guy of Gisborne, aka the sheriff's cousin, and I mean, I love Wincott. He's got one of the best bad guy voices of all time, and this scene of him trying to mess with Robin only to get his ass kicked rocks. Plus, I like how he pulls the classic assistant to the bad guy move right after and barges in on the sheriff who's being a creep. And okay, this is where I want to talk about the cinematography of Douglas Milsome, who had cut his teeth as John Alcott's camera operator on multiple Stanley Kubrick movies before being bumped up to director of photography after Alcott's passing for Full Metal Jacket. But the reason I want to talk about his cinematography isn't because they shot on location, and I think it looks nice seeing natural photography like this, or how he shot the fight scenes. No, I want to talk about his cinematography because like all of the scenes with Rickman are kind of shot like a Sam Raimi movie with crash zooms and fisheye lenses and shaky POVs. Like half of this movie looks like your standard historical adventure epic, and then the other half looks like an Evil Dead movie, which just fully rocks. And I would 100% watch a version of this movie from either the sheriff's perspective or Geraldine McEwen as Mortiana's perspective, if only because I want to hang out in her cool satanic dungeon forever. And not only does McEwen absolutely kill in this role, but the production design of John Gracemark is on another level. Like I said, the stuff here feels like it's from a completely different and way more interesting movie, and I love just how gross and unsettling every scene with Mortiana is. Like she's always mixing blood and spit and bloody egg yolks together, and it's just so gross and so awesome at the same time. And I really like the story between Mortiana and the sheriff and how she's been training him to be a Satanist his entire life, and the way she calls out their deaths early on by the Painted Man. And then there's also this great moment:
recruit the beasts that share our God.
And I could literally talk about these two all day and watch them scheme for a full 2.5 hours if the movie would let them. As for the less interesting and more prominent portion of the movie, we follow Robin as he discovers his father's death, vows revenge, meets up with Lady Marion, and then we meet Little John and the men, and there's a fight over crossing the river, which is one of my favorite sequences in the movie. I also like how at the end of the day, Robin is still kind of acting like an entitled rich kid. Sure, war and prison have made him more caring and mature, but he's also still kind of a dick and thinks he's better than everyone. Like, this moment really jumped out at me.
You planning to join us then, matey?
No, to lead you.
There are a lot of really fun moments with the forest though, like when Will tries to throw a knife at Robin only to get an arrow through his hand, or when Marion comes to camp and we get to see Costner's butt. And there's also this fun little sequence with Wolf trying to practice archery and Robin messing with him only to have Marion mess with Robin in return. And the second half of this movie really is just like 3 major action set pieces with a few scenes in between to help keep the story straight. First, we get the raiding of Sherwood Forest, which gives us this fun Robin fake out death that looks incredible, by the way. Then it's the sheriff bribing Marion to marry him and sending Will back to betray Robin, only for Will to immediately confess that he's Robin's brother.
Our father loved you more than me.
I don't know, it's kind of a weird scene and it feels like it comes out of nowhere, but it is set up in a previous scene. It just doesn't quite gel for me. Then we get the major final battle at the castle, which just rocks. Also, how crazy is it that they hung this kid? Shout out to Daniel Newman as Wolf. He's super underrated in this movie. The stuff with Franny and Little John sneaking weapons into the castle is also super fun and cute. And there's also this insane moment with the catapult, and all of the final battles are great. I especially like the witch's reaction to seeing Azim,
The Painted Man.
The witch.
and basically knowing she's going to die. The marriage between the sheriff and Marion is also absolutely frantic and insane, and Rickman at his most manic. And the movie ends the way all good Robin Hood movies should end, with the bad guys defeated and Robin marrying Marion. Damn, that's a tongue twister. But not before we get a very random cameo from the one and only Sean Connery. So 35 years later, what is the legacy of Robin Hood Prince of Thieves? Well, like I said at the top of the video, it really is the last Robin Hood movie to be a massive hit at the box office. Well, kinda. Ridley Scott's Robin Hood movie from 2010 also cleared $320 million at the box office, which isn't half bad, but that movie also cost over double what Prince of Thieves did. But ultimately, this movie just feels largely forgotten, but maybe that's just because I didn't really grow up with it. Like I said, Men in Tights was my Robin Hood movie growing up, and I do think that parodying this movie is kind of part of its legacy. Like whenever Prince of Thieves gets brought up, I feel like the first thing people do is make fun of Costner's accent and then praise Rickman's performance for being so over the top. There's also one other movie that obviously sits next to this one, and that is 1993's The Three Musketeers. And a lot of people look at that movie as kind of a spiritual successor to this one, and I get it. They're both famous tales that had been adapted numerous times. Both star American movie stars with everyone doing different accents. Both have Michael Wincott playing a bad guy. Both have a score by Michael Kamen, and both have a pop ballad by Bryan Adams. And I'll admit, that is a lot of similarities, but I also think both movies each have their own strengths and weaknesses. For example, I think that Prince of Thieves is way too long, especially the extended cut, which is what I watched for this video, and I think there's a lot of stuff that could have been cut out or trimmed down, but I think a lot of the length has to do with trying to bolster Costner's performance just a bit more. But even though Musketeers is shorter and has a much more solid pace to it, it doesn't have anything even remotely as interesting as the scenes with Rickman and McEwen in their satanic lair. And again, I really would have loved to stay with them even more, and I just love how strange the camera movements become when we're with them. Ultimately though, I feel like this is a movie, like a lot of movies we talk about here, that if you grew up with it, you probably love it and have really strong feelings about it. But I think in the larger world of 90s movies, this is one that just doesn't really get brought up all that much anymore, even though it was a massive hit when it came out. But let me know in the comments, did you grow up with this movie? Which do you prefer, Robin Hood or The Three Musketeers? What about Men in Tights? If you've made it this far into the video, thank you for watching, and as always, a very special thank you to my supporters over on Patreon and my channel members here on YouTube. You all truly keep this channel running, and if you're interested in supporting the channel, there's a link to the Patreon below, as well as a button to become a channel member. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps out smaller independent creators like myself, and that's going to do it for Born to Rant this week. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.